Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we're happy to have Briell Decker back. She was on a bit ago and talked about her experience on leaving the FLDS Church as the 65th or former 65th wife of, what's his name?
Warren Jeffs.
Of Warren Jeffs. Yeah. And thank you, Debbie, for joining me as a co-host today. We're going to talk about the creative story around the making of Prisoner of the Prophet. But first, we thought we'd talk a little bit about patriarchal plural marriage or polygamy. Briell, do you have anything you want to start off by saying your overall general viewpoint?
Okay, so my overall general viewpoint of patriarchal celestial marriage, or whatever they call it, polygamy, is kind of more of a gentle approach. I do like to say that polygamy in general is Stockholm Syndrome. It is strict. My approach is strict. It's just kind of more gentle. So basically I say that Stockholm Syndrome is when somebody is kidnapped, obviously, and they identify with their kidnapper over time. In polygamy, I think there's two sides to it, and it's really obvious in media. A lot of times you see like sister wives, or you see like people that identify with it. But you also see the other side, like escaping polygamy, when people are trapped by the system. That's kind of why I call it Stockholm Syndrome, because there's both sides. And when I first started activism, I have actually a Facebook page that I have a lot of activists that post on, and it's called Bridge of Hope, and it has like a bridge that I painted, and it has like, it's kind of water painting, and it has like shadows of activists in the back, and you would know they were activists, but it's like people. And basically what the concept was when I first became an activist, I have like big picture most of the time. I don't really see like small picture very often. I mean, it's hard for me to see details. I always saw that like the activists, this is my beginning of activism. I'm like, because I've observed a lot of activists since I left the church, is that one side of the bridge was like friendly. So like if you come from the cult, you want no judgment, you want friendly, you want like stuff like that. And then the other side is like the world, who's like, this is crazy, how did this ever happen, and they're more
like breaking laws.
Yeah, so they're more bold. And then why I say it's a bridge is because like they cross over. When somebody comes into the dream center even, or into like different places in the community from the world, and they have questions and they want interviews and they want different things, they sometimes cross over and become a little more passive. Where if you come from the cult, you might wake up someday and say, well, I really was abused. I just didn't know it was abuse.
Right.
So they start to become more bold. So it's like a bridge. You literally cross over, back and forth. It's not like you stay on the bridge all the time, but it's like, right. Back and forth. But that's how I see it. And I also see like the patriarchal thing is a really big thing too.
Right. I was observing a never Mormon in any way do a podcast. She had seen Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and right, she was just reacting on her own about that and about what's going on. And on one hand, she was saying, it would be cool maybe to be Mormon, because why not cook and sew better and learn all those skills, and from a female perspective, right? But then she started to see all the crazy things that was going on in it.
Yeah. So they always say that polygamy, you have help in the house, you have, people to watch your kids and stuff. And I'm just like, well, when you live through it, you kind of get like this different perspective where you're like, there's more kids. So how is that more helpful? You have the same problem. And then you talk to like my mom, Kristen Decker, my mom now, she will say things like, if you get a bunch of friends, it's the same concept. They're just not sharing your husband, which it is more realistic, because then you actually do get the help more often, is what in my experience, than if you're actually in a family setting. Because the family setting you can't really change it that easy either. Where if you have a friend that you don't get along with anymore, it's not that hard to just say, let's find another friend, or let's go our ways, or just go our ways without even saying it sometimes, just because, it's easier. But, I don't know. It just depends.
Well, I would say that's very true, because the one thing I've noticed now, because you were the first wife to come out and really put yourself out on that platform of telling your story. And since then, there have been a few other of Warren's wives who have been able to change their lives and kind of deprogram from that. And it was fascinating to listen to those stories because each of you had such a different experience in it and coming out of it, and how you personally responded to the environment. And I think that was the one thing that I found really powerful when we first talked, was that you said how you're raised from the cradle. And like, when I could identify with that, because as a Mormon, I didn't understand other things or the world until I got outside of that mind, bubble.
Yeah, doesn't
So-
everybody's group could tell them what underwear they're supposed to wear?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's just normal and natural, right? Even though kids don't wear garments, they know that their parents are wearing garments, or they go to the temple or different things like that.
Well,
And
and
so,
definitely as the kids wear like temporary garments that are just supposed to prepare them for
trainers.
Yeah, trainers.
Yeah. And so, Debbie, you had some experience trying to help get some laws changed in Utah for, can you describe what that was about?
Well, it was with Angela Kelly, and she was responsible for trying to put the victims of polygamy on the Victims Fund, which was
Give them more
successful
support.
and passed, because that's like anyone coming out of human trafficking or sex abuse or domestic abuse, there are funds for those people. And then a year later, they decriminalized polygamy. And I wanted to know, because when we first talked, we were in the process of trying to make that happen. And polygamy was kind of a hot topic because Warren was finally convicted, and there was a lot of just, I think, buzz around Mormonism and the polygamy history. And I wanted to know, like, since they decriminalized it, have you seen a difference in how people view it, how people can get out of it? Did that make a big difference at all, changing the law?
It never was going to, in my opinion. It was never going to make a big difference, because they're breaking the law in that one thing to begin with, but they're breaking it in so many other areas. They use saying like, well, we've been hiding from the law for so many years because of polygamy. And that was kind of the concept they had at the time that they decriminalized it. I wasn't actually there. I never listened to it, but I just heard about it.
Yeah.
They basically said, we just want to change this law so that we'll come out in the open, but they're breaking the law in so many other areas. They're never going to come out in the open. Why would they come out in the open when they have child labor and when they have, all these other things that they're breaking the law about? Just because they made an infraction, they actually didn't make it legal because the Supreme Court won't approve that in America. It's already been decided years ago. No. So they had to just make it the lowest they could make it, which was basically a parking ticket. But like, even I was telling Jean, the other day, a little bit before the recording, about my perspective is like, it's a little different than just saying black and white, the wedding, polygamy, because my hope, and I don't get into politics much, but my hope is that like somebody will focus on coercion at some point. And I talk about it a lot because I want somebody to actually do it. Because in the law, when they decriminalize polygamy, they put the word coercion, but it is not defined in Utah right now. So I hope that they will focus on coercion, because I think that an 18-year-old who is married to, the first wife, marries a guy, has 4 kids, and he brings home a child bride later, then what is she supposed to do? Right now in society, they usually say she's an accomplice immediately. When she had no idea he was going to come home with a child bride, even if she's in a cult, she doesn't know her husband's going to be. Sorry, I stopped when those drive by. I tried to anyway. It's daytime right now. There's going to be. They didn't know that their husband was going to come home with a child bride. I mean, even if they're born and raised in a cult, and there is that risk with the prophets from what they have to say, especially in the FLDS. But they don't know for sure their husband's going to be the one selected and all of that at the time of the wedding. So like, even in my experience, I say that I know that Warren Jeffs had 12-year-old brides, at the time of my wedding, because the secret wedding. There's only my father. My mother wasn't even invited, you know. And then I go to Texas later to check on the kids and all of that. And I find out that there is 12-year-olds there. You know, this is crazy. And that he wanted to make an accomplice and all of that, you know, that was really hard for me. So when I think about like my escape and my fighting him for years and being put on a pedestal and like told everybody, if you fight war and justice, this is how you'll be treated, you know, we're going to treat you like her and stuff like that. When I was trapped, for me, I'm just like, it changes in the middle. If you have
being groomed is the start of the coercive process.
Yeah, being groomed. And then when you find out how your husband really is versus the wedding night, you don't always know on the wedding night your husband's going to have a child bride later. And so to just focus on the wedding and say, like, you know, polygamy as an adult is an infraction. If they were a child, then that is trafficking. Well, what if the wife that was home with the 4 kids just wanted to feed her kids when that husband walked in with the child bride? So it changes in the middle. So if you have coercion, if you focus on the word coercion, you can change it in the middle. You can say coercion for a felony is a felony, and that could stay on the reparations. If you say coercion for a misdemeanor is a misdemeanor or an infraction, then you can, so it changes in the middle. If the husband ever dares walk in with a child bride, the wife can get reparations and run.
I like that because that is different. Like, let's say we were 2 adults and we wanted to get into a polyamorous relationship. That takes consent, that takes agreement, that takes like no coercion at all. But you're right, that word is so important because those women usually don't have a voice or a choice if they're the first wife.
Yeah, the religion's in the back for sure.
And I think that would make a huge difference.
Even in a polyamory situation, I think it should, when you define the word coercion, you should make it so that if they bring somebody in who's a child, then it was coercion, whether they agreed it was coercion or not. Because at that point it changes the dynamics of the relationship. So if Utah is going to accept and make a family setting an infraction, I think they need to think about the family setting. Stop thinking about the wedding so much. Yeah.
We should write another bill.
Yeah, I know.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying to reach out to my representative. I've reached out to a few that are friends with me, but like it's a big undertaking because right now the politics is all up in the air anyway because of Trump and the presidents and all of that. So like the Trump and Biden or Camilla or whatever, like nobody wants to jump into politics right now. And then you talk about polygamy is like a whole nother layer of maybe I'll just lose everything. You know what I mean? So like it's really, really difficult to get anybody to do it, but I just keep talking about it because like that's how I did the Dream Center and everything else.
A lot of politics is timing.
Yeah. You gotta just stay at it. And for me, I just tell people because I'm just like, we really need to do this because right now we go by the trafficking laws, which do apply to adults or children, honestly, because trafficking laws are like basically said about like if it's coercion, force, or fraud involved. So they usually use those even in adults cases. But like when you think about polygamy, they usually say those older wives were accomplices. And I'm just like, they can't be all accomplices. Like even when you go into the law, I bet every single one of Warren Jeff's wives would escape if they ever tried to prosecute them because it was a guard tower and there was a gate around it. No matter what their stories are, they're most likely going to be able to prove trafficking. Yeah. So now you take Sam Bateman, who is a different prophet who came after Warren and did similar things as Warren. He lived in the community of Short Creek. And I'm not saying there wasn't threats and stuff, but it's harder to prove.
Yeah.
So, it's just one of those things that I'm like, yeah, trafficking laws do apply to the adults too. But like, why do we need to have it that way? Why don't we just fix the polygamy laws?
Right.
If we're going to talk about it in Utah, especially, they should consider it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Briell, if I remember correctly, it was about 10 years ago that you escaped?
12.
12 years ago.
May 23rd will be 13.
Okay. And then you spent a couple years in Tennessee?
Yes. 2 years in Tennessee, did my
Then you moved back to Salt Lake first.
Yeah.
and then down to southern Utah.
About a year and a half later. Yeah.
Year and a half later. And so at any point were people saying, oh, you should write a book or you should make a TV show?
I did start a book. Like I started a book before I started a lot of media, I think. Like I was looking for people around my circle who would want to be a ghostwriter or, you know, trying to figure out the process. I ended up going to like a retreat and paying my way to this expensive retreat. But like I went there, met a lot of people and found a ghostwriter the first time. So like basically I learned the process. I learned that I could become a self-writer, but I didn't want to write a ton of books. And this ghostwriter wanted to learn the process and wanted to write a ton of books. So we split the cost. She was learning the skill of writing books and it was my story. So we've been working on that for a long time.
So you still have that as a potential project of a book coming out?
Yeah, it's we're in the agent stage. We're looking at contracts and negotiating and stuff. So
nice. Well,
yeah.
I think the one thing that was truly powerful about the documentary, I'm so glad someone picked up your story because it is. When I remember meeting you, I'm such a super fan of what you were able to overcome and persevere and endure. And like just that never giving up is so powerful of an example of just survival in any situation and what you went through. And I think that documentary where you get to walk people back through those places, that must have been, was that healing for you walking through those places of captivity? Or was it kind of triggering? How was that when you were filming those portions of it?
So when I went back to the Dream Center building the first time I walked through, I was actually being filmed, but like I didn't, it never came out. The place that was filming me changed directions after that. But when I walked through, I hadn't had a lot of bad memories in that house. I only had mostly sad memories in that house. I only lived there like 4 months because he was already the prophet before I married Jess. So that house was a target house because that's where he lived before I became the prophet. So he wasn't really there much. And I usually say he wasn't there at all, but like there was one night that he showed up for a second and left or something. So I don't really claim that all the time when you're trying to find a buyer for your building. You don't want to throw in, and you know, all these little details that are just going to be complete distractions to people. So I didn't ever like focus on that. But like, honestly, like the house, I met the mothers who had lost their kids when I lived there those 4 months. So I met the crying mothers who I feel like weren't mothers. Like, you know, I know now the foster care system reunites if at all possible, where he was ripping them away for no reason. That was what I experienced, was the mothers were just sobbing and praying 10-minute long prayers every hour because we're supposed to only have 1 minute prayers, but like there was no way to do that in that house. The mothers were so devastated. So they weren't mothers who didn't want their kids. So that's the thing I remember about that house. But I have way more good memories there now. So like if it was one of his kids or something that had been raised there and had those horrible experiences, I don't think they would have gone after the house. But I wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
So how long ago did you have that book class or whatever?
That was about, I think it was at least 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago.
2017 or 18, right around there. So you're
7 years was 2016 is when I applied for the Dream Center. So I think I started the book before that. I'm not sure. Okay,
so 2016, 17, somewhere around there. And you were on that project, but there was nobody was approaching you for doing a TV show or a documentary.
They were. Yeah.
I thought what you had said last time is once you signed this one documentary in like 2020, all of a sudden you had 7 other offers.
I did have a ton in that 1 month. But
you had people reach out to you
in 1 month, but
you had people reach out to you prior every now and then, and did they just go nowhere? Did you sign any papers on those things and it just fell through, or what happened?
Well, one thing was I had little documentaries all the time with just episodes before that, so I was learning the process also. But like, I'm in the one that's called, what's it called? The one that Lindsay Henson Park does. I'm just in a little piece of it.
Okay. You were
It's more just,
tangentially, other documentaries were happening where you would come in to say a
yeah.
few things.
They don't usually pay you. It was like A&E or something. A&E, the one that was A&E. They don't usually pay you for just a piece in a show. So I learned some of that by being in little things. I think I did like the bonus thing for it was like a bonus episode.
I think you can find Briell's story, and we could probably link some of your
we'll try to find some of the others
below.
Yeah,
because I think that's the one thing that is amazing is learning and watching you be able to tell this story from when you first were able to even speak about what had happened to you, to then getting comfortable talking about it in front of a public audience or in front of people that had no idea that this was a part of Utah heritage or culture or Short Creek, or never heard of Warren Jeffs or any of this. I mean, that's, I think, the beautiful thing of seeing you come so full circle with this, because I feel like that documentary was really well done. Were you happy with
yes, I'm happy with it. I do add details all the time when I talk to people, like Mission Crews at the Dream Center. I talk to them like every week sometimes, but they're in town. They come here and it's just part of the tour. I'll talk to them sometimes for half hour. Sometimes it goes 2 hours, 3 hours, and we'll just add details. If they've watched the documentary, I ask them what's one of the first questions we ask. Have you seen The Prisoner of the Prophet? Because if the whole audience, most of them have seen it, it's easier for me to focus on the nowadays stuff. Because they go like really positive, really fast in the third episode. But like I have so much more history after I leave. And that's what we're trying to talk, like we're kind of talking about today is like, the documentary and stuff. So when I did sign with Kelly Salloway, who was a producer, she didn't have a big history with it. And we were hoping to be on HBO at the time when we signed. I remember talking to the Dream Center. They said, yeah, if you ever get out there, we will help you. And then, so the big board at the Dream Center agreed about my documentary before like it actually got that far. And so like that was interesting because like so the Dream Center has like a board for each building. So the Short Creek Dream Center has a board. And then there's like a big board that's over all Dream Centers that are in the same network. So that's the Barnetts and all of those. So that's just something, though I say the big board. It's like the board that has more people. I mean, that have more responsibilities, with multiple buildings. But each one has their separate ones too. When I signed with Kelly, we signed, I had the 7 people in that same month. She submitted my story on her own because she had my contract and everything, to a large producer company in like New York that was called Every Woman's Studio. They selected my story out of thousands of stories. And that's why it went as big as it did. Well, when they pitched my story, Discovery Plus is the one that picked it up. And so we thought it wasn't going to go to HBO Max. But it was fine. We're going to keep going, whatever. So they were going to pay for it. And then we get to this point in my story where they have the lady who they hired, the Every Woman Studio hired, the director who pitched my story. She came and she filmed the story and she got distracted in the middle, which happens so often in my story. Like they get into the community and they just so she filmed a bunch of stuff that didn't apply.
Yeah.
And so when it got to like December of 2022, I think, or maybe it was 21. It might have been 21. So it was 21. So I think it came out in January of 23.
That's right.
It was 21 in December when they had like most of the filming done. They paid for it. They had us travel to like South Dakota and Colorado Conference. Oh, another thing is that when they pitched the story, they told us we had to have all 3 people signed. We had to for sure have the Dream Center in there. We had to for sure have my story in there, and we also had to have the South Dakota and Colorado Conference, or they would have to repitch the story, and Discovery Plus could say no. So I had to go to all these people after the fact and say, will you please sign?
So you personally went and helped sign the deal for.
Yeah, well, I went and talked to them and convinced them that, like the Dream Center started
Right.
questioning at that time. They're like, really, this is going to go that big? This is not a Christian organization. And I was
Right.
just like, well, you already said you would. So like they ended up deciding to continue on that path, which they're grateful for now because they do talk about God a little bit in there.
You had to promote it to those
Yeah. Yeah. So they did sign, and then they went and did their own negotiations. But like I just got them on that track of like, you really want to do this? You already said you would. Why would I waste all my time if you weren't in the beginning? And then so they actually went into a contract for an entire year where they couldn't have another documentary in the building. Like that. They could have media, but they just couldn't have a documentary. So that was a big undertaking for them. And they did it because they felt passionate about it or whatever. They felt like they should. So I'm so grateful they did. And then the people in South Dakota and Colorado were just people that came from the cult that I did and just acquired the land, and it talks about in the documentary, but they didn't know anything about media. So they were really, really nervous because they didn't know how to negotiate contracts. They don't even know what the beginning steps are. They've never done that in their lives because they're like real estate people. They aren't media people like me. So I had to like coach them through it because they're friends of mine. And in the end, they ended up signing also. And Kelly did a lot of that negotiating also. And then when we all three signed, they were able to proceed. So this lady comes out and films it all. She gets to like December of 2021, and they show all the footage to Discovery Plus, and they fire her because she didn't film what she had pitched.
Oh.
And they say usually it's at that point, but they went and hired another director and paid him to edit it and fix it. And he did film a little more, but it wasn't a lot more. He mostly just went in and redid what she did.
I have heard that directors and
and she wasn't even mentioned in the whole thing because of how bad it was.
Wow.
So like this new director did fix it pretty well, and he was really on board with what was originally pitched. Because like what was gonna happen is like they were thinking in the beginning maybe Dream Center, they'd have more Dream Center people to spend more time in the Dream Center. But they didn't actually pitch that. They just kind of said, we'll have these three pieces, as far as I understand. And then I wasn't there when they pitched it. I just heard about it. And then when the lady came out, she thought, well, maybe we can switch to the South Dakota and Colorado compounds because the Dream Center doesn't want us there that much. They want to do their own later with all the people that come through. And they still want to. I don't think they're doing it yet, but they still want to. And then so they didn't have as much time in the Dream Center. So she changed to say, why don't we just do South Dakota and Colorado compounds? Well, they didn't like that idea. They're like, you pitched Briell, so focus on Briell. And that's what the new director did, which I'm so grateful for. There was a few hangups toward the end of it. I had a relapse when they came out. Like I had a PTSD episode that I never was hospitalized for, but I did have like a small one. And it was because of the triggers and the things they found in the town. People coming forward secretly telling them they were told to kill me and stuff like that. It was really triggering for me. And they left the church over that, because they didn't want to do it, and so that was really hard for me. So then I ended up having a PTSD episode. My mom, Kristen Decker, was really upset about that. But I didn't blame her. It's just we had to talk that all through. And it in the end, when it got to be like December of 2022, then we found out that they were in negotiations with HBO Max. And we were like, what? Is this going to come out on HBO Max? Like we originally thought it might in the beginning. And Kelly Sally was like, no, I don't think it's going to. But it's still going to come out. And she said, you should be really proud of that because right now, because they're in negotiations, they've cut off a bunch of projects that they originally agreed to do. And one of them is they're saying if they're not already edited, then they'll never come out. But like mine was edited already. They were cutting off the funding for the editing if they were filmed and not all the way edited because they were in so much negotiations. Mine was done. So all they had to do was put it out. They put it out on Discovery Plus. About 3 months later, it came out on HBO Max also.
Did you know when it was coming out? I mean, just before it was coming out, did you know how many episodes they were going to do? Whether they're going to do 3 or 4?
I had an idea. I did have an idea of how it was going to be laid out. And I think they had a good plan all along. If it, when the new director got on, he had a good plan.
Now, also
You're the
going,
one that brought the Dream Center. You're the one that brought the South Dakota compound. So it makes sense. The only link here is Briell. That's what he was saying.
right,
Yeah.
right. And what things were happening, like there was, what was the name of that movie with Detective Pyrie in the Brighamite, about the Lafferty brothers?
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it.
On
I never
Hulu.
watched it. I heard a lot about it.
Well, I would say the thing that was amazing about that documentary is because your story, I feel like, is so unique compared to what I've heard from the other people who have escaped polygamy, but also his wives, was because you were wanting to leave. Like, you were not happy camper. You wanted your autonomy from that relationship, from that experience, and how much you had to fight for it. And when you see that South Dakota compound where you're talking, they had towers and wiring, and like there was no escaping that situation.
Yeah.
That I think was like the moment where it really hits home as far as what the harms are in polygamy, when there is that super amount of control from one person and a lot of coercion with a lot of corruption changing hands. I mean,
Yeah, like the domestic violence, I'll say, like, you think about domestic violence in the general sense, it's usually like one person, a spouse, and maybe extended family. But like it's, in my experience, I went through what was called cult violence, which is they were going to believe the leader over me because like they were raised to believe him. He was my husband at the time. And so he had 10,000 followers before he became the leader, even though I didn't know how many had left and how many had been born since that time. I believed there was at least 10,000 abusers when I was going through that. And they were going to believe him because they didn't know what the truth was. Most of them didn't have that one-on-one experience with Warren Jess. And even if they did, there were accomplices, a lot of those ladies. So the ladies that were abusing me, I feel like they were jealous of me. They wanted to be me in a sense, but knew they could never be because they had already blew it. So they were mad and jealous about it. But like, that doesn't make it okay to want to kill somebody because you're not them. It's just, yeah. Not all of them turned that way. Most of them did not turn that way, but there became some really hateful people in there. And then most of the people that were caretakers, like the guys, were never involved in any of that. So they were just told, like, she's worthy of blood atonement. And they were just like trying to search my past for any dating, because dating is the actual thing in FLDS that qualifies somebody for blood atonement in certain cases. So I know in the Mormon faith they believe in blood atonement, but I don't know what the sin attached to it. Like most groups decide on their own what the sin attached to it is.
we'd have to ask Brigham on.
Dating. So they would search my past for any dating. When they couldn't find any significant evidence of any dating, because I hadn't really dated, then they would question Warren Jeffs and be like, because the other side of blood atonement is shedding innocent blood, which would make them not ever go to heaven. So they had to be sure it was a just death. And if it wasn't a just death, then what are they going to do? So they would go back to Warren Jeffs and say, basically, I can't do this. I just don't have the courage or whatever. And he'd send me to another caretaker and start over the process. So I was
like a court of love, like a court system where they're looking for evidence of any wrong spiritual doing to justify killing you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello.
And I wasn't getting a break. It was gaslighting on such a high level.
As a potential
yeah,
rational thing to do, Debbie, right? That's what's hard for us to understand. If Debbie saw her neighbor do something bad to somebody else, Debbie is not allowed to kill that person, right? You have to call the police, right? There has to be somebody in authority. But in a religious context, the authority is the prophet. And then if the prophet gives orders, then that person has authority. But Briell, you're saying that some people can like go back on moral grounds and say, well, I don't think so.
Yeah, because there was no evidence of, he said I wrote a letter or something, it didn't make sense. Like the sin attached wasn't dating at the time. So they're like, what is this about? So they would question. I don't know what he actually said to each caretaker, and he may have changed it between caretakers as he did. But like for me, I had studied his words so much like prior to that, because I was waiting until he got caught by the law so I could research my routes out. So I had a lot of context of his sermons and his scriptures, and I would just use his words. So I was helping them question. I was helping them say, like, you don't want to be the one that shed the blood. You
weren't a lazy learner as far as your life was concerned.
Yeah. So for me, I was definitely helping them question and getting opportunities by doing that. And I was using his words against himself, because he had the right to say that my revelations were from the devil. So I just say, he said this and he could never be from the devil. They'd look it up, they'd find out, they're like, oh, he did say that.
Right.
You know, and
how much of that
on the opposite side of that. And I didn't want him to either.
How much of that you think comes out in the documentary?
Have you just they do a pretty good job at like showing like, you know, what was possible. You know, like I could have, when I had that reservoir experience, I could have been on a compound. I don't know if I was. Kind of portrays that I was. So I couldn't run away to a neighbor, which I didn't know where the neighbors were. And I knew they were somewhere watching me. I just knew they weren't close enough to actually rescue me, which was basically blood atonement. If they could convince me to kill myself, then that's blood atonement to them. You know, it's an accident later, you know, no, you know what I mean? So I ran back to the building that they were all in, because there was other wives in that building that by this time I knew they'd be flagged. By the time I got there, I don't know how well, I can't remember all the details about it, but I think they do talk about how when I was crying on the phone and the caretaker was standing right next to me, so I could never tell them what actually happened, because he was listening to every word. And then when she kind of popped up and said, there's the favorite wife on the phone, and she kind of popped up and said, well, you know, are you not communicating well? And I was like, that's an out. That's something I can accept and just bypass the story. So I just said, yeah, that's what it is. And so she's like, okay, give it to the caretaker and I'll tell him that you're just not communicating well, so we're going to move you to another location.
I think the documentary is available on Prime, and I don't know if it costs money or Prime members get it.
I think it's on HBO Max. I think Prime does.
Max has it.
A bit of money.
Right. Yeah. And so we'll provide links for that. And we did it last time as well, I think. And so we'll have it in this. But I was remembering that there was, you know, around the time you're filming, that Murder Among the Mormons come out. And then around the time that they're thinking about when to actually produce your documentary and make it ready, there was the Under the Banner of Heaven.
Oh yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And they also did that one come out in June the year before mine came out in January. So.
Yeah. But were any of those thinking, oh, we need to hurry and get my documentary out?
I'm sure we're thinking they needed to hurry. But like when we pitched it, like all the places were kind of like secretly listening, and then they had like a group of people listening most of the time they pitched. And then we'd hear from like one person saying, oh, we already got a pitch and stuff like that. So like we knew other people were trying to do similar things. And there still are. There's so many stories.
It's still a hot topic. It's still interesting.
Yeah.
From Mormonism, from the beginning to the end, to every group that's broken off, it's such a unique history that I don't think you find in Americana anywhere. And I feel like the one thing that was super interesting that most people don't understand about Warren was like when you were in the Dream Center and how he had that house wired to every other house. Yeah. Like that guy, no one could do anything in that community because it was a closed community, but then he was basically tapping in on everyone's business and then had everyone basically tattling, you know, for favor, because I know that was definitely a big thing with him as well. If you went and tattled to Warren about so-and-so, you might get another ring up on the, you know, good favor chart.
And even like the police were on the payroll too, right? Because it's like his town and everything. So,
now that you've been back, has being back in Short Creek, your hometown that you grew up in, that house working, like has the community changed? Because now Warren's been gone for so long. Have they had a chance to think on their own?
Definitely different, but it still has cliques. So there are a lot of similarities to like FLDS. FLDS have a lot of cliques because, like, especially nowadays, when you think about like Warren just in prison, he might die any day, and then they all like hope he doesn't. They hope that they don't. They won't voice that they're worried about it, but they're also looking for the next leader. And so, like, then this one guy pops up and this guy pops up, so it creates cliques within themselves. Where like if you think about like their doctrine, it says things like, you know, follow the true leader and don't listen to anybody else, you know, don't question. So they have to have the true leader. So it splits up the family like maybe 3 times if they all follow different leaders after Warren just dies. So they're starting already these cliques. And then
they're having their own faith crisis within their community.
Yeah, they could split their family in 10 directions. You know, they have huge families, 50 children sometimes, you know, and they could split their family in a lot of directions where if they just leave the church, it splits once.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
well,
did you?
does he still have control like he did over the community? Is he still having people write him letters? Is he still communicating and giving revelation?
I don't know. I kind of think they do have like they have things going on. They have like Lyle is like back in power.
So when the show came out, did you preview it ahead of time, or did you have watch parties when it was actually airing?
It just aired, and I watched it the same day everybody else did.
Did you watch it with family and friends, or just by yourself?
I watched it with my husband, and he made me watch really slowly. He didn't want me to have a PTSD episode, so we watched it like 3 different days. Like we didn't watch it all at once. But anyway, I was gonna say like. So when they leave the church, they have that one split, and it's a different type of cliques out here. They do have the option of maybe picking up the phone and calling the person, where in the church they don't, if they follow the wrong leader. Where in out here, the cliques are more like a lot different. You know, there's the friendly groups that just want to only be friendly, never want to be bold, you know, as far as their face and their branding and all of that. And then there's the groups that are just like, you know, we want to be bold, you know, and their branding is all about that. And how do you mix the two very easy? You're going to be one or the other most likely, especially in like the funding sense of the word. When you think about like, how are you going to fund a big, huge project in Utah, where like if you have grants, there's a high chance there'll be Mormons writing those grants. And then you have to filter through and see if they're going to tell you how you can run your organization and how you're going to help your people, and if you want those suggestions or not, because a lot of times the Dream Center does get grants, but they don't always accept all of them. You know, they only accept the ones that match what they can actually, how they want to treat their people. And then if you go the Christian route, then there's also the religion part of it, where everybody's like, why would you bring a religious angle into a religious community that was hurt by religion? And I'm just like, well, you got to realize we have to fill in all the gaps of how they're going to be treated. And the Christians actually, when you get into the building, it usually serves as a protection because they're all Christians. Most of the people on the earth, at least the leaders, are all Christian, Bible Christian. And they have a long-standing history against Mormonism anyway. And they're going to believe your story, which is a good thing in healing, whether you're a Christian or not. And they try to make it like optional in the Dream Center because they are hurt by religion, and they don't realize it's a whole different God and all that, you know. So they just try to make it optional, so they don't have to be Christian. You know, it's not a requirement, you know, or anything like that to even go to church. But like, they try to be sensitive to that. They don't always know they're going to be when they're first entering the building. That's the catch. Is like, am I going to go into this religious building? And especially like the friendly groups that are over here saying like, you should stay in polygamy and go on to another polygamy group, you know. That's the zone where we help people stay in polygamy, and ours is like we help people leave if they want to leave their culture. They should be able to. If they want to leave their family, that's a different topic. And so
we'll do a whole show on the Dream Center's work.
Yeah, and the funding is a big part of that.
And maybe the history of the Dream Centers, because they were there before you even worked there. I was under the impression from the documentary that you like helped start the Dream Centers.
Founder of the Dream.
You are.
I'm a founder. I donated the building to them.
Okay. And
so I had the building first. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in the next episode. And what I was thinking is, once the documentary was aired, how did it change your life very much? Did people say hi to you more around town?
Oh yeah, I had so many comments and so many things, but like I realized like probably a year later that if I click on the episode, because I never watch my own episodes unless it's like a big thing, huge. Like I did watch the documentary, but I usually don't even watch half of my interviews. I've never even like that. It's just because I don't have time. I'm too busy.
And you were there at the interview. you know what you said.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't notice if you clicked on the interview, you'd see all the comments pop up. You don't see the comments before, so I just figured nobody was commenting. I have hundreds of comments that I've never even seen, but I love to see them because most of them are positive. Is what I've observed since then. Is most of them do look like they are positive about what I'm saying, what I'm trying to do, different things. So, yeah.
That's right. Well, we all think that you are a hero, and thank you for coming on our show.
I say this 100 times. It's one thing to say, oh, I survived this bad thing. It's another thing to then take that trauma, that grief, and turn it into something that actually helps people. And that's what you did with the Dream Center, like going after Warren's house, amazing, then turning it into a place of refuge, becoming a peer support specialist, where you come from a place where you know what it's like. It's, you have hands-on experience. I think that is the best part about your story. And I think you should just tell it every place you get a chance to, because I love seeing you interview and I love seeing your story told, because like I said, it is such a story of overcoming a lot and making a big mountain out of a really crappy
pile of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we encourage everybody to watch The Prisoner of the Prophet if you haven't already. And like I say, thanks again for coming on the show. And we'll talk about the Dream Center in a week or so, whenever we can get our calendar together. And everybody that likes our show, like and subscribe, share this with friends if you know, because Debbie and I are in some circles, where there's antagonistic about the church, but I think it does help people see, because I remember thinking like, oh, the other people are crazies. It's not the Mormon church. It's the Community of Christ. They're crazy. Or the FLDS. They're the crazy ones. Or the Jehovah's Witness. They're the crazy ones. We have the true church or whatever, and so it's helpful for people to see other religions and other experiences and see how that does match up with what's going on in their own life and in their own belief system.
Well, and also I think to take something from a place of you've been traumatized, we've all had trauma, and to turn it into a thing of healing, because that's, I think, the most powerful message from a human experience, regardless of where you come from, is being able to take it instead of looking at it and saying, I want to burn this thing down and put everyone in a dark corner, or let me bring people up, let me help people, let me, that is the true Christian method, is helping and loving your neighbor and doing the widow's mite. I think you represent all the wonderful things that a true believer of Christianity would sponsor, or just a true champion of people who want to help survivors. It's such a good story, and I think it's a great example for anyone coming out of a high demand religion or a cult or a bad relationship, just how to make it.
That's good. Right. She's modeling good behavior now.
Well, I did have one comment that I wanted to mention from one of the viewers one time. What was saying, like, the Mormon church is like a generational thing. My angle is actually healing from generational abuse, just so to be clear on that. It's not cults. It's not, polygamy, especially. It's like healing from generational abuse, which includes some of those things. But
patriarchy,
violence, all that stuff, is also part of my story. but like trafficking, you know. But I like to say this comment was like about like the Mormon church has had generational history of people wanting to do what you did. You know, they're like, you got that building, you have that building. How did you do that? Like, you know, everybody wants to be that, and they wanted to be that for years. But I can honestly say it wasn't just me. You know, I do like to talk about God, but like I also want to say, like, the community, if they hadn't have done what they did, that house wouldn't have been an option for me, because I was not a legal wife. So in the court system, I would have had to be a legal wife to get a house, where like if the community wasn't so unique and had the opportunity for me to even apply for the house, being a polygamous wife at one time, and then knowing, because there were ex and all these people, like it was a whole slew of circumstances that I had no control over, that just added up together led to where we are, you know, like.
Right. It's not like you're Wonder Woman or anything like that, but you are part, you are part of the success story. Yeah.
I feel like I did it all myself. I feel
That's
like the community still helps me. They still do a lot of good for me. And I know which people.
It takes a village.
The time I need it. So that makes a huge difference, even though it's a very unique community and there are cliques, and I do fit into a lot of those cliques, even though I don't fit into all of them.
All right. Well, everybody out there in podcast viewing land, have a good rest of the year. The year is coming to a close. We're only 2 months left, and the year will be over. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.